started. Okay, so welcome to the MMT Tech Meetup, October 2020. My name's Ilesh Mistry. I'm a CMS specialist and a content MVP. I also work for a company called MMT Digital. And MMT Digital basically are a company that helps their clients build digital products that transform business performance. If you need to contact them in any way, you can use the QR code. MMT Tech Meetups are basically tech meetups that are front-end driven topics that we kind of go through. We tend to generally have them like every month. And should you ever want to, talk at a future meetup or know someone who's interested, then by all means just contact me and we can sort something out. So just before we get started, by all means add your questions in the chat as the talks go on, and there'll hopefully be sessions at the end to talk to people and ask questions, etc. We will be recording these sessions, so don't worry if you have to kind of drop out, because the recording sessions will be available at some point once we've released them. And if you can, it would be really good if you can share your views and tweets, etc., using either hashtag MMT_Tech Meetup or any of the handles that you can see there. Today, we're going to be having an agenda of myself going to be talking about NightwatchJS. Then we've got Radhika talking about Codecept and introduction towards it. Then we've got Michael, who's also going to be talking about Codecept with Playwright. And then at the end, we've got Owen, who's going to be talking about his Cypress journey. Okay, so let's get started. So I'm going to talk about NightwatchJS. And just a little sort of like intro on the slide. So I'm Ilesh Mistry, if you've joined a bit late. CMS specialist and a content MVP. If you need to contact me, you can use the QR code on the right. So today with Nightwatch, what am I going to be covering? Well, I'm going to have a brief sort of intro slides on end-to-end testing and what it is. Then talk about NightwatchJS and how you can get started, and show you a few examples, and then hopefully there's a few takeaways that you can take away from this. Okay, so what is end-to-end testing or automated browser testing or whatever the names are out there for it? But basically, automated browsers, it's really trying to automate them to perform end-to-end functional testing on your website or application. So you don't want to be doing this manual stuff where you're looking on the screen. Like, manual is great as well, but when it's automated, at least it is handled elsewhere. And what it allows you to do is obviously test whether something is broken or not, test whether it's meant to be working as it's expected to be working. And this is where automated browser testing, end-to-end testing comes in. You can cover a broad range, like detecting something is missing on a checkout process, or filling in a login form and then finding actually, someone's added a new field in, or on a contact form. And you find, like, if something like that's broken, you want to be told about it, and actually some test, to be actually notified that, that's happened. So, there's obviously reasons on why we would use end-to-end testing. Especially when it comes to like a client environment, clients get they're not happy when something that was working there, or something that's there and there's bugs appearing all the time. It's very sort of like disappointing on yourself if you're working, and obviously on your company as well. Like it's very bad sort of feedback and reputation that could be lost by just small bugs even coming through. So there's other reasons, like like you could have like a bug that's been there but no one's noticed, and then it becomes into a bigger one, and then it obviously causes sites to crash, etc. There's other things where like you've got functionality there that was working perfectly for 3-4 months, and then suddenly something new comes in, but actually you don't know about the fact that it was actually related to something else and it's broke. So there's things like regression testing that could be really good in this scenario. A lot of things as well is like you could be actually wasting a lot of time manually testing things, and that can be sort of like resolved by these automated tests. And also like as much as you can try and pick up with your manual testing, there's certain things that you can't see or pick up yourselves. So this is where end-to-end testing and automated browser testing can really come in and help out. So one of them out there, there's lots out there, is called NightwatchJS. It's basically built with Node.js or built on top of Node.js, and it's one of the popular Node.js end-to-end testing frameworks solutions. And what you can do with the actual Nightwatch itself is that utilize kind of similar to quite a lot of the end-to-end testing tools, is like you use CSS classes to kind of detect what to test, or XPath as well, which is another way of actually getting to a specific element on the page. And NightwatchJS uses the concept of like using like a WebDriver. So in this case, a W3C WebDriver API. And in the example that's shown here, it's like basically focused on Firefox. And it uses that to kind of allow you to then launch the browser up and start testing, and then obviously return the results. And with Nightwatch, I think it was released in 2014. And one of the things that they've just recently done is they've provided a big update, 1.50. I think it was like on the 20th of October. So that previous example was showing you like one example of a browser that you could use. And obviously it's highly recommended not to just test on one browser, otherwise you'll be in trouble. So it's really worth like looking at sort of like what Nightwatch offer here is a Selenium grid stroke cloud option. So it allows you to test multiple browsers with different web drivers to allow you to kind of make sure your coverage is actually covering everything that it should be covering in sense of your test. The other thing is as well is like it's very similar to things like you could utilize and incorporate in with Browser Stack, Source Labs, cross-browser testing, and Lambda test as well. So there's ways to kind of bring everything together with Nightwatch, but then at least you're like serving all the different browsers and testing them. So how do you get started with Nightwatch? So as I mentioned before, like Node.js is like one of the big requirements. So that needs to be installed. And once you've done that, then you need to install Nightwatch. So there's a command here is npm install Nightwatch. And then once you've done that, then you need to kind of think about what WebDriver APIs and sockets you want to use. So basically, you can choose a couple of browsers, or you can go for them all. So each of them need to be kind of installed. So in this case, the example is the Gecko driver for Firefox, and then the Chrome driver for Chrome. But there's other, like you can obviously start looking at other browsers as much as you want, and then add in the web drivers accordingly. One of the big things obviously you need to kind of utilize in here as well is that you need to install Selenium Server via the Java side of things. This allows you to make sure that you actually are running across the multiple browsers. So if you want to do multiple browser testing, that's going to be quite important. And one of the key files that you're associated Nightwatch with is nightwatchconfig.js. So on the right-hand side, you can see an example of this. So it's got areas, and hopefully my mouse will come over. So you can specify source folders, so where you want your tests to kind of be included. You can also say, okay, like whether you want the process to start. And the port is obviously important because that's what's going to trigger, in this case, Firefox and launch that up. And then here is some sort of like default testing that you can utilize. So you can basically set default, values that then can be utilized later on in your tests. Along with like the bits I showed about getting started, there's key sort of elements that you've got to think about in the sense of like some, key terminologies that you would use. So, or codes. So basically in this case, assertions are like really big. So that tells you if a test has passed or failed. And you need to know that. So, you could write a lot of code to do lots of testing, but actually, you need to know whether step 3 is actually failed or step 5 or something that you're trying to look for. So, that's one of the big things. So there's things like wait for element visible, check if some title contains X, Y, and Z. The other options you have as well is like you tend to use quite a lot of is set value and URL. Set value allows you to do what is kind of said there, set value. So you can go in, say, into a contact form and add in a bit of text, but you need to select that particular field and then add in that bit of text into that field. So you can imagine it can be quite powerful if you're filling a form in and you're testing that via sort of like a automated test. Other things you can do as well, like is you need to obviously direct the users or direct your tests to a particular sort of browser URL. So you can use that as well. So the URL property is quite big. And then sometimes you might want to do something where you want to expect something to be there as a visibility element in there as well. The general structure of these tests, they look like this. So they'll have something like module.exports, and then within the curly braces, you tend to say, okay, what are you trying to do? And that bit of text that says something to tell you about the test is really just anything. You can put any set of characters in there. It's just more of an instruction or description of that test itself. And then you tend to use the function around it, and it could be a client or browser element. But once you've done that, then you can utilize all the commands that with some of the commands I mentioned earlier, but all of the commands that you can utilize from the Nightwatch website. So here's an example of one where you've got an example here that you go to Google, search for Nightwatch. You can see here that it's also that got an element here to allow you to store variables. So you don't have to kind of like type in hashtag search and then the next div, etc., etc., etc. You don't need to do all of that. You can just do that once, and you may be utilizing that more in the project, in your tests. And then you've got like series of commands. So it's hopefully quite easy to read in a sense of a readable format, in the sense that your client, you're going to go to a URL, you're going to wait for that body to be available, and it tells you how long it's going to be there for. And then you say, okay, is something going to be visible? Yes or no. That's when you'll get a return back to say yes or no. And then you set the value, and then you click the button, and then there's pause elements as well. So you can go through all of that, and then you can understand that the test can get quite big, but the beauty of this is the fact that these codes are written in code. These tests are written in code. So, you've got the option of like really, putting things in source control, adjusting quite easily. There's no GUI, so you don't have to kind of drag and drop and think, oh no, I've missed a step, and then have to kind of redo the whole thing again. It's very sort of like easy to kind of add an extra step in or remove steps, etc. And then if you wanted to run it, then say in this example, it's npx, and Nightwatch is just the things that you need to have in there. And then you specify, and this is how you run a manual test, but you will specify the path to that particular test. In this case, google.js is the test that we're looking for Nightwatch. And you can do things, so obviously like it's not just like one test at a time, so you can do test groups, suites, and you can basically say, okay, well, I want to run the whole test group of smoke tests in this example here. Then all you need to do is on the right hand side, you can see that it says -- group and then smoke tests. You might find that actually, you've got lots of tests, and then suddenly there's areas where you need to make sure that you want to exclude some things. So you can skip as well. So, you can say, okay, I want to go through all of these, but then skip this particular one as well. So I'm just going to quickly do a quick sort of demo, show you some code, etc. So I can just bring up Visual Studio Code. Okay. So the nightwatch.config.js file or it is pretty much the biggest one that you need to kind of concentrate on when you run Nightwatch. Generally, the folder structure can be as you wish. You can see here it's quite small. The key thing is that file. Potentially, there may be some logs due to the fact that you've done some testing and something's actually come out from them. And then you tend to have like folders that you can do things. So you can see here that I've got folders for screens. I've got folders for the test output, and I've got folders for the test itself. And then you can obviously go dig deeper down as well in those particular scenarios. The actual config file itself, you can get this. This is pretty much a standard what you get out the box. And you can see here, this is where we can look at the source folders of where the tests actually sit. There's also areas that you can add like paths to particular objects and commands and the sessions and custom ones. And then you've got things where you've got like test default settings. So basically this can be your test set, default area where you can say, okay, well, in this particular scenario, I've got screenshots and that's enabled to true. So if there is a failure, I can get a screenshot from that, and I can show you that in a bit as well. And then you've got areas where you can say, okay, what the default browser could be, and how you can set up other browsers. So for example, Safari in this case, Firefox, Chrome, etc. So you can imagine that this file could get, quite big, but then you've also got the elements that you can actually incorporate like browser stack information as well. So there's lots of things that you can actually utilize in this particular file. So let's show you like a quick search demo. So what you've got here is what I'm going to do is actually go to search client, wait for a little time, and then actually go and search for the Nightwatch website. And I'm going to say that I'm going to actually just enter the key, put the enter key in, and give like once I've got there, I basically want to check that I'm actually searching for what I'm searching on there on the search results. So to do this, let me just quickly put this in npx nightwatch, and in this case it would be in the search folder, and let's try and do search demo.js. And one of the things is that it's going to use a default browser. And what I sometimes think is like, do I want to use that? Do I want to try a different browser? And in this case, I'm going to change this one to say, okay, I'm going to try and use the Chrome browser instead. So it'll try and run through the test itself. It will run through everything it can to kind of get this ready and launched up. So it'll be a few seconds, and then, have I got the wrong? Yep, that's fine. So live demos as they go. I didn't say I was in the test folder. So test folder, yep, search, cool. Okay, that's it. So a few more seconds, sorry. And hopefully this will launch up. Cool, looks like it's doing something. And it's launching the browser. It's going to the search itself. It's a bit fast there, but it's going to search for NightwatchJS, which is done. And it's now going to go to the website. And that's what we want it to do. So imagine that you can create these tests. And what happens to these tests is that you can, this is a very simple example, but this is going through and say, okay, I'm going to go and add in the word NightwatchJS into my search, pause for a little while. And once I'm there, the results, when I get that results, I'm going to check if it's got, and this is just an area it's looking for. So it's just it could be a div tag, it could be a class name, it could be, and in this case, it's just an element it's looking for. You'll have to look through and, you know, find that element within the results. But then it's saying is once it's got that, assert it out. So in this case, what you'll find is that you will see that that assertion has passed here and how long it took. Once it's done that, then it's going to click on the results itself and then go to the NightwatchJS page. What you'll also notice here is that I've actually split this down to illustrate that you can break things down into two different tests or groups. And you can see here that basically this one has passed and now it's looking to pass two. So if, for example, you had like lots and lots of you know, elements in there that you're testing and doing lots of things with, imagine that it was just in that one whole group. It would be very hard to kind of pinpoint what you're looking at, although it will, you know, say what's failed. So splitting it down is obviously going to make it easier and easy to manage, basically. So that's like showing you a very quick test that's been set up. Then what you have to kind of think about is like, you know, what happens if something fails, right? So let's have a look at a failure. So doing the same sort of search, and in this case, we're going to Google, so it'll be different. But once we've done that, then what we want to do is say, okay, that should fail because it can't find that bit of text. So, you know, what should happen is that you should get a warning here, but I want to also see, hopefully, is an image kind of captured in the screenshots area. So let's do that. So let's demo failure. Okay, so it's just running through the test. So it's going to try and go to Google, try and add this in. Just agree that, but basically that's what it's done. It's trying to find this, and then it should hopefully close the browser itself. Cool. Okay, so you can see here that you know, there is some more information here. So let's go back to, here we go. So that's where it started to run the test. It gives you some information of where it is and what browser it used. Told you like, you know, part one passed, so that was cool. Part two, basically it was looking for this text. It was trying to find that, but it didn't get that, is what it's saying. And basically, for part of that, what will happen is that you've got a failure. And that failure would then hopefully indicate that we've got, and also you get the results, sorry, so you get the results here to say what's failed and what's passed. But hopefully, if I go and bring up another screen, just 2 seconds. So within my Nightwatch area, I've got the screen section and search demo failure. I just launch that up and bring that across, sorry. So what this does is that it tells you that this screen is where it failed at. And you can imagine that that can be really powerful in a sense that you've got loads of areas that you're putting tests on, and then you find that there's a failure somewhere. And obviously you can add in some notifications to kind of trigger to tell you that a test has failed. But knowing exactly where that test has failed is going to be valuable as well, visually as well. So, you know, I feel that screenshots part of it is like really powerful feature, part of Nightwatch. Okay. The final bit of the demo would be, you know, like to show you that you can also do things where you've got a form set up. So in this case, I'm looking at a website which is called Kentico Content, which is a CMS, headless CMS that I work with quite a lot. The idea is to go to the sign up form, you know, find the particular join area to make sure that exists, add in your email address and password. Don't get, you know, this is more like logging. This is not logging in, this is joining, so it won't work. But that's the kind of concept here, that you can go ahead and start testing forms. And let's see if this runs. If not, we'll come out of there. So this is MMT Meetup. CodeceptJS. Okay, so it's gone to the website. And it's failed, and I think it's failed because the fact that it took a while to get to that page. And I should have put maybe some more extra sort of like pauses in between. But you can see here that that's actually, another failure where you need to kind of control how, and sometimes it's hard to know how quick a browser could launch a particular website. So, knowing that, you've got that sort of ability where you may need to kind of just adjust these values a bit more, makes it quite easy to kind of be done in sort of like a JavaScript file in this case. So, and I can just bring that across to say that that's a failure there. Bring that image across. And at what point it fails. So to me, it would be like, oh, okay, so, the text didn't even get the opportunity to fill in into that field. So I need to have a look at why that happened. So hopefully you can see that the screenshot side of thing is really powerful. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so I found like, especially with my sort of experience with NightwatchJS, that there were some gotchas, things to kind of be aware of, and you need to consider, and especially like sometimes it's a bit more trickier if you're working on a non sort of personal machine. So, things like full permissions need to be there because you can't write to that particular area, and you can't like install the right things that you want to be installing. So just be, bear that in mind, and make sure you're obviously running in administration mode. Also, with also the updates from Nightwatch quite recently as well, is to really make sure you can kind of running up to date versions of Node, or use Node version manager to kind of make sure that you're using the right one for the right sort of solution. And obviously, if you need any help, then the website's really good to follow. They've got good step-by-step guides to allow you to kind of install it and work with it, and lots of API tips, and there's a good community out there as well. So what we found, like when running Nightwatch, is the fact that here are a couple of stats from a project, and what we found is like it actually saved time, from like like bug fixing. So there was like 60 to 70% potential time that we saved. From that particular project, we found like we had like 33 test suites, and 150 of those, 7 of those tests actually used. So there's quite a lot of tests going on, and doing this kind of automated browser testing means that your developers and your team are more productive doing other things. They're not worrying about too much about, okay, like do I need to test this, do I need to test that? They'll know once the tests have failed. And even better is like if you've got a test automation engineer in your team, that's ideally they'll be picking this up straight away. Oh, there's something that's changed. Or if you're working in Agile, if you've got a story and a new story coming up that knows that there's going to be some dependencies, you can kind of add a test automation engineer into that mix, and they'll basically pick that up and say, okay, well, you might need to add a test for this as well. Also, we found obviously, kind of what we needed to be doing as well is that any new bugs that we found, a new test was created for it. It kind of just made sense. So that was one of them. And then previous bugs were caught, and obviously they didn't make it to production, which is really good. And we found like a quite good sort of selection of information from running this on projects. A couple of takeaways that you can take away from here is obviously NightwatchJS is free, which is really handy because it's a good solution that you can use with Node. It's easy to set up. I found it was really easy to set up. It saves a lot of time rather than you having to test other things manually. Obviously, a bonus is obviously it's for JavaScript developers, but any test automation engineers or with someone with JavaScript knowledge can work with it. The community I felt was quite well supported. The syntax of actually what you use to run these tests, I felt it was very easy to kind of understand and follow. It can be extended as well, which I didn't mention, but the fact is it can be extended to add your custom controls, custom ways of actually including your test as well. And it's kind of one of the better ones out there, which is like the Node ones out there to allow you to do JavaScript automated testing. So that concludes sort of like end of my session. I was wondering if you've got any questions. Because we've got agenda coming up as well.
There's a question in the chat, Ilesh.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Do you run tests on each environment? So, so that's a good question. So the tests we find like you can run it on every environment. It depends on what type of test they are as well. So some tests you may want to just keep on specific environments, but I feel that if you run them on all the environments, then you know the outcome of it. So I believe you should run the tests on all the environments. In particular, prod is obviously a big one because you want to make sure that it doesn't have an impact on your production website, but as you deploy, it may be worth running those tests so you know that whether that deployment is successful or not. So I think it's probably viable to run it on every environment. Given the fact that Cypress is already on the go and having a lot of changes. A good question as well. If everyone hopefully should see that in the chat, but given the fact that Cypress is already on the go, having a lot of changes in an active community, would you still stick with Nightwatch or would you think of migrating to Cypress? So good question again. I think like Owen's going to be talking about that later as well. I think like, it just depends on like your preference really, and also your specific requirements. So you could have a team that are say Nightwatch experts, or find the actual sort of the sort of syntax very easy to follow compared to say Cypress. They may choose that, or you might find that they may choose something like Codecept because of a particular scenario at that point in time. So I feel it's better to choose the right sort of product when you're looking at it now. So maybe like if Cypress was around when I looked at this on another project, I may have chosen that. So it just kind of depends. And I think like your preference obviously will come into play depending on the client, depending on what you need to achieve and your expertise in your teams. Okay. Do you have any more questions? Cool. Okay. So I think that's it. If you've got any questions, obviously, by all means, just carry on with the group chat, or you can obviously contact me later as well. So next up, we're going to have Radhika talking about Codecept and the introduction to it. So I'm just going to hand over the controls over to her.
Thank you, Ilesh. That was a really interesting talk.
Okay, no worries.
I hope everyone can hear me.
Yep.
I'll share my screen. Hope everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Uh, Hi everyone. Welcome to MMT Tech Meetup, October 2020. Just 1 second. Yeah. Today I'm going to talk about CodeceptJS. Before going any further, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Radhika Vanteru, working as a test automation engineer for MMT Digital based in UK. Here is my QR code, LinkedIn profile QR code. If you'd like to contact me. Yeah. So what are we covering today? Here is the outline of what I'll be considering in this talk. So basically it's like CodeceptJS. What is CodeceptJS and architecture of CodeceptJS and how we can install CodeceptJS on your machines, and I'll give a quick demo of that, and then how I integrated with Azure pipelines in my current project, and finally CodeceptJS takeaways. Next slide. Yeah. So what is CodeceptJS? Before diving in, let me explain why I chose CodeceptJS in our current projects. So just give me a minute. Sorry for that. So yeah, sorry, some interruption on that. Yeah. So sorry for that. I have implemented CodeceptJS framework for one of my projects. So we developed basically we developed some Selenium spec flow for C# based projects, Cucumber BDD framework for Java based applications. Basically they build on Selenium. But one of our major account UI application is built on JavaScript. So we thought that we also would like to develop a test framework that's in the same language that can understand the developers as well. So we were exploring to find out a compatible framework for that. We found out tools like CodeceptJS and Cypress. We preferred CodeceptJS over Cypress for this project. So Cypress is a pretty impressive tool as well. So, but the limitation of usage of Chrome browser only during that time has led us to use CodeceptJS, which allows multiple browser usage as well as more flexible and more reliable features. Now let us dive in. Completely, CodeceptJS is not like not a new tool altogether. Rather, it can be used along with other existing infrastructure. For instance, if you're using WebDriver, Puppeteer, Protractor, or Selenium, you can use CodeceptJS on top of it, and you execute your code from there. So it's similar to the SpecFlow, Cucumber, Serenity, BDD frameworks. If you have used those tools before, it should be pretty easy as well. So completely, it's like a modern end-to-end testing framework built on Node.js and easy to build and maintain. And their website is codecept.io for more information. And I can say the documentation is pretty easy and comes in very, very handy. I have gathered information from the documentation as well as interesting talks from the founder, Michael, and he will be presenting after me. So I'm sure he will give some insightful contributions. Yep. And furthermore, what is the best about CodeceptJS is although it's a JavaScript based framework, but you don't necessarily need to know JavaScript very well. Basic concepts of JavaScript are sufficient. Uh, it's really very user friendly. So for example, if you want to write your test, looks like a scenario is like I'm on page and I see and I click these commands. So a lot of these commands are like custom built, and you can use like very easily. So each test is described inside a scenario function with the I object passed into it. Just is a quick example for that. These commands are really very, very handy, very easily we can write these commands in a test file. Then move on to some quick features of CodeceptJS. Um, this is like scenario driven. We can write our own acceptance test immediately. So there is no need to implement additional libraries or packages. It's everything inbuilt. You can run, it's like easy to set up and flexible, and you can run your code like in a WebDriver or Puppeteer, Protractor, RPM. It supports multiple drivers. There is no need to change the code, just change the driver. That's a high level advantage of CodeceptJS. And one more important feature is like debugging. It's like you can pause the script at any point. There is a command like pause. You can do your own debugging and can do step-by-step execution. That's really handy while dealing with the failures. And you can use like any locators, CSS, XPaths, IDs, and it supports page object model as well. And one more interesting feature is like it supports reports. Is like there is a good available of reports. One main reporting is Allure Reporter. We can showcase to anyone to understand the outputs. It's a really a good option. And another interesting feature is like parallel testing. If we consider like in my case, if there are some 200 test cases, it will finish like in 15 to 20 minutes by doing the parallel chunks. So I can run like a 4 to 5 browsers at the same time. It will reduce the time. And these are like important features. I just gathered not many. There is, please note that this is not an exhaustive list. There is much more CodeceptJS features. uh, and then move on to next slide. uh, the architecture of CodeceptJS. This diagram represents the CodeceptJS architecture. So they are drivers like web helpers, WebDriver IO, Protractor, Nightmare, and Puppeteer. So these CodeceptJS bypasses execution commands to helpers. So what, depending on the helper enabled, your test will be executed differently. If you need cross-browser support, you should use the Selenium-based WebDriver. If you're interested in speed, you should use that Chrome-based Puppeteer. So all helpers share the same API. It's easy to migrate tests from one backend to another. However, because of the difference, I think it's difference in backends. There are some limitations as well, but they are not guaranteed to be compatible with each other. For instance, you can't set, I think, request headers in WebDriver or Protractor, but you can do so in Puppeteer and Nightmare. But there are many similarities. You can migrate test from one helper to another helper. No need to change any code. So it's up to you. You choose any helper you like. You may get some confusion on these many helpers, but it's up to you to choose any helper. It's not difficult to migrate to different if you wish to change. Depending on the helper selected, list of available actions may change. For my project, I chose WebDriver IO because my client is like, I need to support multiple browsers, so we chose like WebDriver IO in my project. Apart from the ones we have discussed, there are a couple of other helpers as well, which includes like Playwright and Test Cafe. And next, we'll discuss like, let us know how to installation. How do we install the CodeceptJS with WebDriver IO in your machine? It's really pretty straightforward. First step, we need to install Node.js on your machine. Then it will initialize. Then the second step is like npm project, using this command npm init. So it creates a packet.json. This where all the dependent libraries will be saved. I'll show the demo later on later slide. And then next step is to install the CodeceptJS and the WebDriver IO. This is the general command. These two dependencies are added. Uh, as a result of this execution of this command, node modules will be created. And then the Selenium standalone service, need to install the Selenium standalone service. If we are using, means if you are using the WebDriver helper, then this is mostly like you need to install the Selenium standalone service. And you can add this plugin in the configuration file. I'll show you that later. Is like you need to add this plugin in order to start the Selenium standalone server. Is like automatically, no need to start and shut down it manually. So it will start automatically, and it will start the server, and it will stop the server automatically by this plugin. And then for example, for the first instance of the configuration of CodeceptJS in your machine, use this npx CodeceptJS init command, and that will ask some couple of couple of simple questions will be prompted. When you answer that, it will initial like questions like include where are your tests are located, which helpers you want to use. For example, if you're using web, and which helper, for example, you're using WebDriver, you can like select the WebDriver or Puppeteer or anything, and the what base URL you'll be tested, and which browser you want to show the browser window, or you need to means like headless, and the file name of the test file name. Then after answering all these questions, it will create a test file for you. And then once you create any test, then this is the command to run the test, npx CodeceptJS run. It will run your test. Then moving to the next slide is like let a bit deeper into the test scenario. I'm showing a simple example of that. This is like a GitHub functionality. I'm checking the login functionality of GitHub here. I have one scenario in this. This is like I'm on page, and I click some commands and filling the details with the username and password. I'll see the element, and then I click signing out, and I'll see the validations for C's command for the validations. So this is like, yep. And this is like very easy commands. You can easily, you can write it. Next. Sorry. Yep. Let's flip on to code. Everyone can see my screen. It's Visual Studio Code.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yep, this is the example file I have created already. So this is example test file. I'm checking the GitHub login functionality. The first one is like first command. I'm on page. It navigates to the means it navigates to GitHub page, main page. This is the URL I specified in the config file. Sorry, github.com, and browser is a Chrome. It's not headless. It will show the browser, and this is what I mentioned is like package.json. These are dependencies of CodeceptJS and the WebDriver IO, and node modules will be created. And here I'm using the page object model as well. So the username and password is stored in the login page. I mentioned in the config file, the login page. This is what the example test. Just this navigate to the main page, and I'm just put on wait to see the commands execution, and I can see this. Click on the login and filling the user details, and just seeing the user as created means login or not, and finally sign out, and finally I can see the validation of sign in again. So I'll run through the test once, see the execution of the test. It will from the browser. You can see the web browser. There's a wait like 2 seconds. So you can see the browser. Sorry guys, it's prompted in another screen. So it will open up the browser, sign in, it will sign out. So it will close the browser. It's a simple example to show. It just open. You can see the steps with some of the commands as well, and you can get the output here. If you any test fail, then you can see the output file as well. It will generate a good reports. You can use some commands to generate reports. Let's move back to the presentation again. Can you see my presentation screen? Yeah. So now we discuss about how we integrated in with Azure pipelines in our current project. it's like with the in our current project, the tests are integrated with the Azure pipelines with the help of system team. This has enabled automated and or scheduled test runs. So we'll schedule to run daily morning. This really helps in order to create. This really helps to or this like we are running in the morning and we schedule to run in the morning. We integrated through Azure pipelines. So in order to create a pipeline, click on a new pipeline button. It will ask you where your code is stored. I just selected the Azure repo in my case. Furthermore, it will ask some configurations. I'm not discussing a bit detail here, so you can choose your setup. It's like my current project. You can choose your setup, your pipeline, and it will ask some installations like npm installation commands and CodeceptJS, and you can add some tasks like how to run the test and how to publish the reports as well. In our project is like, in order to run on multiple environments, we have created a release pipeline for test. Tests will be executed on dev environment and QA. Of course, there is a possibility for us to run on various environments like staging and production as well. And furthermore, after execution of test run, it will generate a detailed reports which will help us to understand the percentage of passed tests. Here you can see like how many tests are passed and how many tests are failed. And this is like time taken for execution. This will enable us to propose further tasks in order to rectify the failed test. And it's like in order to run the regression suite daily, is like this is how it will run daily in the morning in the regression suite. This is how we integrated with Azure pipelines. And finally, it's like some notable takeaways here. Tests are easy to read and write. I'm well impressed with the documentation and clarifying any queries, which was very beneficial to me personally. As I mentioned earlier, it's like its primary advantage of CodeceptJS is supporting multiple browsers. It will generate beautiful reports, and there is a multiple possibilities to integrate with different CI tools. I've shown it with Azure pipelines, but it supports like different CI tools, TeamCity, Jenkins. And yeah, in my conclusion is like, I must say CodeceptJS really impressed me with its capabilities of and ease of use. It's really a great tool to automate your end-to-end tests. Yep, thank you. And I can take some couple of questions that you may have. Otherwise, if you like to know more, feel free to connect with me. Is here in my QR code for my LinkedIn profile. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, so there's one question in the comments. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, once again. The test tab in Azure Purple, can you give? I can't show you that right now. It's like my current project that's this client base. So, but I'll give you how I can show you that how we can create like in the test tab. But now it's like I can't show you that right now.
So I guess like Norbert, if you could basically just send us some details and then we can get back to you on that question. Thank you. Okay, do we have any more questions? Okay, if not, thank you, Radhika. That was really good. We're going to now go over to Michael, and hopefully, Michael, you can hear us.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, brilliant. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, is the screen sharing?
Yep.
Okay, so very big thanks to Radhika for introduction to CodeceptJS and for good words about CodeceptJS. That really means a lot to me to have the feedback, like it's easy to set up, it's easy to work with. Because usually by reading CodeceptJS chat, I have a feeling, oh no, people have so many troubles using my framework. Why did I develop it if it caused so much troubles? But yeah, that's nice to hear that for others it plays very nice. So that's the problem of being a developer. You not always hear the good feedbacks about your product. So yeah, you may fall into depression because of this. So thanks again for good words, and probably that will boost my productivity on work. So I'm Michael Bodnarchuk. I'm author of CodeceptJS testing framework. So this talk is like continuation of the previous. After we have very good introduction into CodeceptJS, and you know what it is, I will tell you what is Playwright, why you should be care of it, and how it can boost your productivity in testing. So let's go. I'm from Ukraine. I'm working on open source testing tools since 2011. So I started with conception in PHP, then I decided to share my knowledge and put this into JavaScript testing world. So basically I have lots of products, but maybe some lack of visibility doesn't make them worldwide success stories, but I'm working on it. And at this moment, I'm trying to build my own startup, which is a test case management system, which unites all testing solutions. It's a testing system for automated tests, for Cypress, for CodeceptJS, for WebDriver, for Jest, for everything. And this system can handle all your tests, even automated ones. But let's go to from the wide perspective. What is end-to-end testing, and what we do here? So by most popular meaning of this term is we talk generally about browser testing here. And the hardest question is here, how to set up those browsers. Do I need Selenium to run those browsers? How to make browsers run faster? And to be honest, browsers are also very flaky. They are very memory hungry. They very need lots of resources, probably some cloud-based solutions like South Labs, which is also very expensive to use. So browser testing is a pain, and by its own, by the concepts of browsers. And the web applications, which are our system under test, are also very problematic for testing. So because our UI is flaky, and this is the nature of asynchronous JavaScript, that sometimes you click on the button, but it's not reacting immediately. We can't do anything about it. In modern web applications, there is no application states that we can use because the previous web worked like that. You have forms, you fill in input, you click submit, and you go to the next page. And you know which page you are at and which page you have been. But when you have lots of pop-ups, windows here and there, you don't even know what is on the screen right now and how to handle this. That's another problem that is must be solved for when testing for modern web. And the problem which is relevant for all ages, for all eras, is locators. Yeah, locators are always a pain. Because the web pages are very complicated. Finding the correct element in DOM is always a problem, and we can't do anything very good about it, just to try to make this pain less. Playwright is a tool that tries to simplify all of those named problems from the browser perspective and from the web application perspective. So think of it all as a Selenium alternative. So real Selenium alternative. It was created by the same team that was previously working on Puppeteer, but for Puppeteer, they worked in the Google Chrome. Then they moved to the Microsoft. You know, Microsoft nowadays buys everything and probably everyone. So all the cool guys now go to Microsoft to work on the cool project. And Playwright is very similar to Puppeteer, very similar by API, very similar to how it works. But it's quite different because it's cross-browser. So if Puppeteer was a tool which is designed only for Google Chrome, the Playwright expanded this success to work on the Safari engine, WebKit, and to Firefox. So this now works in all those three engines. So I would say all modern browser engines are supported by Playwright. If you don't need old Internet Explorers, Playwright is your choice, because now Edge is also built on Chrome. So probably you are okay with Playwright if your client work only with the modern browsers, and they probably must be working with modern browsers only. And what I like, well, the Playwright have a headless and window mode by default for all of these three browsers without any problems. You can turn this on and off. And yeah, that's very awesome, especially because I'm a Linux user. I have never seen Safari. So, and now I can see it on my Linux, and I can turn it headless and in Windows. So there was no other way to test my scenarios in Safari without it. And even the Playwright started as Node.js tool. Now they are expanding it to have Python bindings. They now have C# bindings. Probably they conquer all other markets. So this tool will be universal to all other languages. Think of Playwright as dev tools. So this is my browser. This is dev tools, and I have lots of tabs and controls over here. And comments, I can perform some actions on it. And now let's imagine that this tab have API, and Playwright gives us access to all that API, and this access is cross-browser. So even this very dev tools is related only to Chrome engine. This will work to on all the browsers. So this is the difference between the Playwright and Selenium. The Playwright gives access to DevTools protocol and allows the internal browser tooling to communicate with the page. It also have bidirectional control. So in Selenium, you can only send a request and wait for response. Send requests and requests. So all communication is synchronous, but Playwright can bring some events into your test as well. So for instance, now you not only sending messages to the browser, but browser can send messages to you, like, hey, a pop-up has opened. Hey, the uploading has completed. Hey, the request is processed. So you can take that power from the messages that browser sends to you, and you don't need to poll the browser, like wait for 5 seconds more to make this result to be finished. The browser can notify you on this. So that's very powerful concept. And from what I know, the Selenium thinks on embracing this concept as well and taking this into next Selenium as well. How does it work? If you know of Selenium, that it works via protocol, it have a standard, they have a community of browser vendors supporting. What is the magic here? How Playwright works without all of this? And the magic is hidden in the patches that the Playwright team sends to browser and exposes the internal control of a browser to the API. So basically, this is good and bad for Playwright. The good part here is that the tool have all the control of browsers through set patches. What is bad here is that this is not standardized way of doing things. Probably one day Firefox and WebKit will accept these patches into the core, but at this moment, Playwright provides you some built-in browsers with their patches, so you can't use any browser from your operating system. You need to rely only to the packet in browsers which Playwright provides. But yeah, again, this is very cool because this allows them to drive features very crazy and make new features come very fast because they can expose all browser APIs through these patches. So basically, they work with the browser code, and this is why the Playwright is powerful and the team behind this is also awesome. For instance, they added video recording in one of the recent releases, so the feature that is still possible in Selenium, but with lots of work, introduction of third-party tools and so on, while Playwright supports this for free with just built-in solution. Network modifications is this feature which is Cypress is very proud of, but it's not possible in Selenium. But in Playwright, it works as very flexible built-in functionality. So remember, DevTools, Network tab, you have access to all of this. You can mock requests, you can block requests, you can do everything with requests, and Playwright gives you API for doing this. And device simulation, yeah, you know it. We can switch to mobile very easily. And yeah, you can also have access to this feature. So for instance, you can say like, open me this website in iPhone mode. So you will get the same screen as a phone. You can slow down network connection to test how the website behaves on slow networks. So this device simulation may save your time and money if you don't want to, if you need to run your tests on mobile browsers, but you don't have enough resources to do this via native mobile browsers and without using devices. You can emulate them and run in Playwright. I think this will be enough for most cases. So this is API of Playwright, very straightforward, but still some things needs to be mentioned. So the code looks pretty understandable. Go to, click, wait for requests, and so on. So unlike Selenium, where we have only one object, which is browser, we also have context and page, where context represents a browser instance, because you may have two windows of browsers. One is normal and second is incognito mode and another incognito mode. So by default, Playwright provides you a way to launch multiple browser windows so you can tab in the browser. So let's go a bit detailed in this overview. As I said, the browser controls all the scopes of browsers that will be launched. So when you start your browser, this object will be created. Then you need to create a context, a single window of a browser representing one of the incognito contexts, and you can't share the cookies or other data between those contexts. So for chat applications, if you need to test them on their pages where you need multiple users, context is a very cool feature. Then goes to tab, which is represented by page, and then the element, which is
can everyone hear Michael, or have we lost connection?
I think we lost him.
Okay, he said he's just got Zoom disconnected, so he might join in a bit again. I think he's back.
okay, where did we stop? I don't know what was this. Anyway, can I continue, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry for the interruption. Yeah, the next element is pretty much the same as in WebDriver. This is element which represents web element. So you can click on it, do some input, and yeah, this API is very similar to Selenium. Also, you have frames which you can get full control of, and some JavaScript handles. So the API is very nice, elegant, and yeah, you can write your Playwright scripts with Selenium experience very easily. But let's go and talk about some limitations of Playwright. So at first, if we talk about end-to-end testing, we need to be aware that Playwright is not a testing framework. So it's like Selenium. So Selenium by itself is a tool to drive your browsers, but not a testing framework on its own. Same goes to Playwright. So there is no assertions, there is no auto retries, no implicit waits, and other features I would say that are very important for end-to-end testing. Also, even I like the API, I would say that this API should be used by experienced developers because all operations are asynchronous, so you need to use await, and you need to know where to use await. You need to understand those objects or context page and all of them. And yeah, to work with this API, you need to be a very good experienced engineer. So that's if some newbie comes to testing into JavaScript, probably Playwright is not the best place to start. But CodeceptJS supports Playwright as well. So as we already have seen that CodeceptJS have very straightforward syntax. You don't need to know JavaScript very good to start using CodeceptJS. And just as the way the Radhika showed us, we can execute our tests in WebDriver. Absolutely same way we can execute our tests in CodeceptJS. I must say that because of Playwright architecture, tests will be executed faster. You need less time to set it up. You don't need Selenium server, no external tools. And you will have a better experience in development. Here we go again. Okay, Zoom can't handle this amount of information. Okay, let's continue. So let's see how we can power up Playwright with CodeceptJS. So I will skip this part because we already had this introduction. I will just mention that the modern way of installing CodeceptJS is running this command, and it will install, just execute this command, and you are done. You can execute your custom project with it. So next, we initialize a project. We select the Playwright as default engine because yeah, we can select WebDriver. But if we want to try Playwright, here is the settings we need to pass in and basically create a new test. So, and we are ready to start. So the first test should always look like this. At first you open a page and then you have no idea what to do next. That's how I write my test. I have no idea what I am testing. So I use this pause command to make browser to be paused, and then I can type in different commands and see how they work. So this is a short demo of how the test is launched, and I'm filling the location field in the Airbnb website. I found this selector by looking into the DevTools, and I'm using CSS to locate that element and filling in the location. Yeah, so this is the power of interactive pause, that you don't need to guess the locators. You can try them. You can switch turn this pause mode for everything and just work through it and get your tests written completely. Similarly, for the selecting the things in calendars are always very tricky, but because we can test different commands here, we can pick up the good locator for it and pass in the data into it. So I have chosen this Airbnb website as a demo because they had very bad testing experience previously. They improved their UX here, so I can very easily navigate through their UI. So yeah, I will skip to this most. Here you can see all the successful comments were recorded, and you can just copy them from this file and add this into your tests. So this is how a test can be written with CodeceptJS. So, you don't need to guess what page, you can just write test as it runs. So leave edit mode, I would say. And our test I was writing will look like this: opening an Airbnb website, filling the field by its CSS, then pressing enter keys, then selecting navigation, pressing enter, and, clicking search values on that page. There is also a new tool with CodeceptJS. It's called Concept UI. It looks very like Cypress, but have some features that Cypress do not have. Maybe Swift also have some. Cypress also have some features that they are not present in Concept UI, but we are trying to make it better every day. And you can see the result of execution in Concept UI. For instance, assertions are green, and all the commands are white. So you can try it on your own project. There is web-based interactive browser support. You can run tests in the single browser and easily toggle headless and window mode. So probably I will skip about the features because yeah, already mentioned by Radhika. And I just want to mention that you are not limited to the commands which CodeceptJS provides to you from Playwright. You can get the full API of Playwright in your CodeceptJS test. So if sometimes something is not enough for you, because yeah, CodeceptJS tries to have very small API, but for very commonly used actions. But if you need to do something very specific, like emulate dark mode for your website, you can use Playwright API inside your test, get the page object I already told you about, and emulate color scheme dark in using it. Also, CodeceptJS and Playwright by zones support XPath and CSS, and CodeceptJS have a wonderful tool, LocateAttributors, that allows you to write complex XPaths, because I don't really like XPaths. I'm not really, I can't write the complex XPaths from my head, and I'm relying on this very flexible API to create this XPath for selecting an edit button inside a page, inside a table. That's very flexible and easy to handle. So the conclusion here. CodeceptJS is a testing framework which is focused on end-to-end testing. So if you remember, I showed the code for Playwright, comparing to the code of CodeceptJS. CodeceptJS is very focused to scenarios, for test scenarios, and is very friendly to testers. And it doesn't expose the complexity of testing workflow to your code. You basically do not need it. And by doing this, CodeceptJS delegates actual execution to other engines like Playwright, WebDriver, and others. And CodeceptJS is free, open source, and it has a long time of existence. And because the Playwright started very fast last year, and now it's a very fast evolving tool, I really recommend use CodeceptJS with Playwright, not to rewrite your old test of WebDriver or Puppeteer, but try to use a new project with Playwright, because it's really awesome and it gives you so much feature you could only dream of before Playwright. So thank you for this for watching this presentation, and here are links for the demo, my Twitter account, and the test case management system for automated tests I'm working on right now. So if you have lots of tests, you are welcome to try it. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Do you have any questions for Michael? Oh, got one in the chat. I think.
Yeah. Let's... Okay, so can you show how you were able to send commands to the browser interactivity, like fill field? Unfortunately, I didn't prepare interactive setup. I can, but I think I can try. Let me. To use the command here. So I'm opening browser. It opened this website. Okay, so after receiving some messages from a browser, I'm in interactive pause. So should I fill this field? Because I don't really remember at this moment. It's so for now I just copy this class, which is not very good to use, but still I fill field this class and some value. And this is how I do it with interactive pause. I can click. Probably it's, oh, no, it works, but with some slowness. Okay, so the biggest feature or to Cypress technology is quite different. So I would at first compare Cypress with Playwright. Cypress works inside an iframe, and instead of sending the commands to
I don't know if it's cutting off for everyone else.
This comments with about Cypress. So Cypress has very limited support of iframes, of uploading, downloading files, and other tricky things to have that you can list in the Cypress limitations page. So yeah, you can Cypress limitations. So I would say that Cypress, yeah, so Cypress is very good for developers, for front-end engineers, for component testing, but it's not so good for end-to-end testing when you have a journey for across multiple websites, because Cypress only supports working from one domain. It is not very flexible when it comes to working on different sites, so build with different tools. So yeah, it's quite different, and it's not as powerful as Playwright, but it may be faster and it may have better user experience. So these are just different tools, and yeah, you can say that CodeceptJS in some cases are more powerful than Cypress. In some cases, Cypress is more powerful. But CodeceptJS is powered by Playwright, so you should better compare Playwright to Cypress instead, and take user experience of CodeceptJS and see which API you like more. And next question is that CodeceptJS is awesome with TypeScript. Are you going to keep improve the TS integration? So personally, I don't use TS, but we have in team the people who are using it. So probably we will do that improvement, and we already created a guide of how to work with CodeceptJS and TypeScript in version 3. So you can create a new project with TypeScript. You can also easily start with TypeScript. So yeah, Conception will try to take more and more in TypeScript. That what we won't do for sure is rewrite everything in TypeScript, because, well, it's fine how it is in JavaScript. But yeah, TS is really good thing to have. I was stuck with calendar date tweaker. Thanks for showing this. Okay. And would you say CodeceptJS could be a stepping stone towards Cypress, or the usage of CodeceptJS is enough? So I would say that Cypress is, if you have teams of front-end engineers and testers, CodeceptJS should be used by testers, and Cypress should be used for front-end engineers, because they developed these components and they know better how they work internally, so they can use Cypress to work with them. While CodeceptJS exposes all the application from the user's perspective without knowing how all the things work. That's why Cypress asks you to use all of internal tooling, like use JavaScript, client-side JavaScript very often, or use some very complicated logic to work with the components. So it's more comfortable to use for front-end engineers, I would say. Are there any solutions to run 20 or 30 tests in parallel with Playwright? Very likely possible on remote machine grid. So yeah, there is RQMove. You may know this tool if you have used Selenoid. So RQMove is a scalable Selenium, which is scaled by Kubernetes. And in recent versions, they added support for Playwright. So it automatically scales all your browsers to 20, 30, and spins them up, down. Also, there is, I think, this service, which also allows you to run as many parallel instances as needed in the cloud. So check those things out, and yeah, there is no problem in scaling Playwright. Oh, so many questions. I think there are no more questions, so I can probably finish, right?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for those. Okay, so thanks, Michael. So I guess next up we've got Owen. So over to you, Owen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just bear with me a sec. Cool. Can you guys see the Cypress logo?
Yep.
Sweet. Cool. Well, let's kick off. So first things first, just a quick introduction. So my name's Owen. I work at MMT as well in the engineering department. I don't have some suave QR code to scan like the other guys, unfortunately, but you can grab me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I think my Twitter was on the other page, and it's ironically not on this page. Great. A bit of a disclaimer before I get in as well. This is fairly high level. There are some code examples, and there are recordings in here as well of some demos, of which I realize over screen share may not play very smoothly, so I might pause it a little bit. If I do lag as well, because it's been a little bit laggy for the last 30 minutes for me, just tell me to stop for a moment and repeat if needed. Anyway, what is Cypress? The best place to get that answer is on the homepage of cypress.io. I think the way they describe themselves as a fast, easy, and reliable testing tool for anything that runs in a browser, which is both their strongest benefit and strongest weak point in a weird way as well, based on some of the stuff we were talking about at the end of Concept there as well. I massively love Cypress, far too much, to be honest. The user experience of using Cypress is absolutely incredible. And I just think it makes everything so easy for a developer that it's one of the main reasons some of our enterprise clients are now starting to shift to Cypress. The ultimate goal of what we want to achieve in end-to-end testing at scale is from the moment a developer pushes code from their machine for a new feature, no human needs to look at that until a customer sees it in production. That's the ultimate goal. Now that's pretty extreme and pretty unrealistic. We are nowhere near that as an industry, I don't think. But I still think that's quite a nice, ambitious goal to have. Like obviously, at any point in the pipeline, at any environment, the idea is your automated test suite would fail if something goes wrong, whether that's in the code you've changed or a journey that's not in the code you've changed because it's somehow impacted it. Anyway, enough of me blabbing on about that stuff. So Cypress, it kind of says how to get started with it right there is, you know, as you would expect. It's an NPM package. NPM installs Cypress. And the thing I love about it is that is all you need. You don't need, obviously you need Node.js as well, but you don't need anything else. There's no other NPM packages you have to install to get started. That's all you need to get started with. It's really, really simple, all packaged up. So let's go straight into why you would want to use Cypress. So first and foremost for me is its human-friendly testing, as I like to say. And you'll kind of see that a little bit in some of the examples we've got coming up. I just think their base API is really intuitive. Like we'll talk about some of the examples when we get to them actually, before I get carried away. But it also supports things like feature files, which I know the other libraries like Codecepт do as well. So you can have a given when then kind of cucumber style test. And it would work as you expect it to. Also, really, really fast performance, and this is down to their bespoke architecture, which we can talk a little bit about as we're going through the deck. But their approach is different to tools like Selenium. Those kind of tools that use things like WebDriver IO, they send connections over a remote network. Cypress is a complete U-turn on the way end-to-end testing works. It runs in the browser directly alongside your application. It means it has certain access that other tools don't have, but it also means the performance of it is really, really fast as you can get, but with a couple of trade-offs, which we'll get into. Debuggability as well, I'm not going to say much more than this, just watch. Make sure you're sitting down when these demos come up. Also, it's open source, but maintained with an exclamation mark. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few slides as well, but I think that is a cool benefit of Cypress. Seamless CI, there's a slide on this as well, which I'll talk in detail, but it's really easy to get started. And again, it is maintained for you. You don't need to do anything. A truly beautiful ecosystem as well, where they've got a whole load of plugins. Again, it's kind of tapping into that open source community. There's a lot of things that have been done for us. So we can get started with all kinds of different things out of the box without us having to worry about anything. And then lastly, cross-browser support. This does not use Playwright like we were just watching about. And it kind of still has the same level of support as Playwright. So at the very bottom there, it mentions that it supports Chrome, Electron as well, because it runs in Chromium-based Edge and Firefox. So some support, but if you really wanted a test suite that's running across legacy browsers, then Cypress may not be for you. Anyway, let's move on. So this is taken straight from their website as a disclaimer, but it kind of paints some of the picture as well. So one of the other things that Cypress is an all-in-one suite. It gives you everything you need. There's no picking and choosing of certain web drivers that you need, assertion libraries or anything like that. It includes mocking. It lets you stub timings. It lets you mock the responses of network requests. Everything's included in the base Cypress API in some really nice documentation that lets you kind of see it all in one. And that just makes for a much better developer experience, once again, for writing tests. So let's get straight into code, right? Here is a really, really basic test, which shows a test on MMT's website. All this does is go to our homepage, of which is mmtdigital.co.uk. That's configured in a separate file. And before each test, it would go to the homepage. And then you can kind of see this has probably got a pretty familiar syntax that most people have seen. The whole describe before each, and it does this. So it brags about being a carbon negative company, which if you didn't know, now you know. And it checks if the page contains a certain piece of text. It's kind of a bit of an arbitrary test just to show you some basic syntax. Gets an anchor, clicks it, and asserts the URL should be the page that we end up on. So that's like the CY is the main thing to get out of this. That's kind of what is Cypress, and that's what all the Cypress commands that you see in the documentation attach off. Right, this is a recorded video. I'm not sure how smooth this is going to play, but I'll play it and we'll go with it. So this is basically just showing you what the test that we just saw the sample code for actually looks like if we run it headed on our local machine. If I click play. So you can see on the left, we've got Cypress itself. So something I didn't mention is Cypress is an actual application that will install on your machine when you run it to the npm install. Is doing. Now, if I carry on and play again at some point here, I think so. I've pinned a point in the test now, which means I'm wanting to expect what happened here. So maybe the test failed, and I've kind of backtracked through that timeline of events, and I've found the part that didn't make any sense, and I'm kind of wanting to investigate further. And what I can do then as well is even inspect the DOM at that point in time and figure out, what exactly happened here, what's going on, what were the elements around it. I can play around and see what was going on at that moment in time, which for me is just incredibly powerful. Obviously, we saw things like screenshots from Nightwatch. This takes it to a level above, a little bit what looks to be like the CodeceptJS UI, which I didn't know existed. So that's really cool to see. But for me, this is what really sets Cypress out. It's this well-presented, recorded way of navigating your tests. So that's a really basic test. Now there's a more comprehensive one, which is not this video, it's this video. Again, this is quite basic, but all this is doing is showing a way of getting certain inputs and typing into them and basically being able to submit a form, although the form doesn't actually get submitted here. So on the right, again, I've got my actual test. I'm going to visit the contact page. I'm getting rid of code from the other test because I frantically panicked and realized this was not up to date. and I'm getting the input for my first name, my last name, and I'm basically using the .type command. Really simple, really intuitive, and hopefully it won't lag too much. It does type really, really quick, as is the case with most tests. But you can see it did go through these steps, and I can see the message I typed as well. Hello from MMT Tech Meetup demo. Blame Owen for this, in case I actually sent it, which I didn't in the end. And again, I could go back and inspect any step I wanted, see what was going on at that moment in time, which is where, as I say, so much power and so much, I guess, efficiency can be made from testing. So that was a couple of examples of how Cypress works, and how we can use it locally and how we can check through the timeline of our tests. If I go through ahead. Now I want to talk about what we can do to make our tests really quick and easy to write. And something Cypress comes with is what they call commands. Commands is basically a way of, like you can in any framework, it's just a clean way of adding your own custom commands to the to the CY global object. So much like I do cy.get or cy.visit or even .type, all of those kind of things, they're inbuilt to the Cypress API. I can just seamlessly extend this with my own. So this example is showing a logging command, which I actually did recently for a client. What this does is it visits the login page, it types my email and password, and it clicks to log in. Then I'm presented with the need to enter a verification code. And what I've got here is an NPM package called Gmail Polar, I think. Don't quote me on that, I can't remember. And what this does is it basically, I'll give it the configuration it needs, and it will poll my emails until it gets an email from account at example.com with the subject I've defined. And when it does, it will extract out the verification code from the email. And then Cypress will automatically put that into the input and proceed. So all of a sudden, I'm able to do a complete login, even with multi-factor auth, all within Cypress. And what I love about this is to use it is as simple as this. If we just go back to that very first test where we keep bragging about being a carbon negative company, all I have to do is before each, in this case, cy.login, as long as I've imported those custom commands, it just works. It will do all of that. And something I didn't mention on the first slide is Cypress has automatic waiting, which is why you can't see in any of these sample tests, there's no cy.wait for 2,000 milliseconds. Cypress just knows when it needs to do things. You don't need to type in manual waits. It will just figure out when it's okay, when it's safe to proceed to the next one. So that was an example of a custom command in Cypress. Now I'd like to talk about plugins. So Cypress, as I said, is open source. You can go on their website now, and they've got a load of plugins available for all kinds of different things. That could be React component selection instead of having to do CSS selectors. It could be, oh man, I don't even know what. There's visual regression plugins, which I'll come on to at the end of this deck. One of them that they do as well is Cypress Audit, which I've got here. And what this includes is Lighthouse and Pally for accessibility. So here I'm configuring Lighthouse in my plugins file of Cypress. Again, this is a recorded video, but fingers crossed it's okay. And I'm kind of defining all of the measurements I want from Lighthouse in this schema items. And I'm actually gonna, in this case, I'm storing them into an influx database. So there's a bit of extra fluff in this code to kind of show how that's done. but it also hopefully shows how easy it is to run a Lighthouse test automatically alongside all of your end-to-end tests, and automatically throw that into a JSON and put it into an Influx database, which I think is really, really powerful. And suddenly you can start failing builds if it's not meeting your Lighthouse metrics, if your performance isn't good enough of your front-end web app, or your accessibility is not up to scratch. So that's kind of the setup, but how do I use it? Well, again, it's a little bit like a custom command, but in this case, it's provided by Cypress Audit. It's just cy.lighthouse. And this plugin, it gives you those core Lighthouse metrics, so I can define thresholds for performance, accessibility, SEO, etc., which I have defined, and I'm now running it. So you can see it's actually running Lighthouse in Chrome. So it runs it on MMT's website, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, you can see it passes, which is great. I mean, that's only because I lowered the scores until it passed, but nonetheless, it passed. And obviously, again, the power of this is awesome. You can define thresholds for your team or project, and you can make your builds fail if you've got this integrated into the pipeline, which is super easy, as I said earlier, and we'll come into more detail on that shortly. So that's plugins, many, many more on their website. Feel free to check them out. And it keeps doing this. Right, and now I kind of wanted to make a point on like Cypress is a tool we can trust. As someone that kind of dabbles their toes into enterprise accounts with MMT, being able to trust the tools that we use is really important. And this is used by a lot of big players now. Some of them are just on the screen and also on their website. They've got a more comprehensive list. But equally as well, it's not only something we can trust because big companies use it, it's something we can use with confidence because of Cypress's business model. What I mean by this is they have a business model where they have a workforce that maintains Cypress, even though it is open source. And that's because they make money out of a dashboard that they sell, which I'll talk about in a moment. But for me, that's one of the biggest pluses as well. There is a paid team constantly looking at this library to make it better, to work with their dashboard. I really, really like their business model. It's very much opt-in, and it gives amazing power to everyone, whilst revenue for them, for their bigger clients that need the services that they build as well. So onto that dashboard for a moment. What is the dashboard as well? So the Cypress dashboard is basically like a CI and obviously UI to accompany it to run all of your end-to-end tests. So there's a quick screen grab here that just shows an example of that. You can kind of see a list of all your tests. You can go into individual tests and see the recordings all within the dashboard. It gives you really useful analytics onto flaky tests, ones that keep failing intermittently. So you can kind of isolate these issues. And it also gives you power, like running lots and lots of Cypress tests in parallel to make them run really efficiently, which I think someone was asking about earlier for Concept. You can get started for free with the Cypress dashboard. There is a free tier that's got quite a lot of limitations. Obviously, the pricing model kind of spirals up to enterprise. They have a pricing page again, so if you're interested, I recommend you go and check it out and just try and get started for free and play around. But even though they sell this, it's completely optional. You do not need it, and you can actually get an awful lot of it in your own CI really quickly because they make that super easy as well. Oh, and how they make that super easy is by maintaining Docker images that have Cypress and all of the dependencies it needs in a maintained image that you can pull as part of your CI. So you can pull a Docker image and run your test suite, your Cypress test suite with the Docker image with very, very minimal effort. again, this for me, this is kind of links back again as well to the fact that they have people maintaining these things. They all play hand in hand, so I can use these Docker images and hopefully not need to intervene too often. So just another benefit and another way that makes this so easy to get started with and continue to get run with at scale. And then lastly, the thing I wanted to talk about as well is around visual regression too. So something in our move to Cypress on some enterprise accounts, one of the things we're quite big on is visual diffing of both component level screenshots. So that could be individual React components, for example, or journeys, like key milestone steps in journeys. And the way we do that at the moment is actually by a custom extension in Codecept. But there's built-in plugins in Cypress as part of the community again that allow you to do all the visual regression within a Cypress test, and it's as easy as cy.match screenshot. So much like some of the sample code you saw earlier. And then two big players in this zone as well, Percy, which was recently acquired by BrowserStack, and Applet Tools. So Applet Tools is particularly powerful because it has what they call the Ayres SDK, which is the idea that if you take a pixel perfect screenshot of a journey or a component, say a button, and then you take it again a week later, like a lot of the time that might fail because one tiny little pixel is out or someone's fonts have rendered different in one place compared to another, and that's a pain. Applet Tools has an Ayres SDK and they only fail visual tests if the human eye detects a change. That's what they claim. So yeah, two really powerful options, and again they have Cypress plugins so you can get started separate to the Cypress one for approving visual diffs, which is really important the more scaled you take your testing. And if you really want to achieve what that vision was I said at the start of being able to push a piece of code up and no human need to look at it until a customer sees it, these are the kind of areas that you're going to have to fill. So that pretty much brings it to a close, really. That's all I've got to say on Cypress. I mean, the kind of capabilities of it are really, really powerful. I'm a huge advocate of it. There are some downsides that I've kind of not really brushed on too much, but I guess to quickly touch on it, the fact that it runs in a browser and gives you that peak performance and access like no other also means, again, what we were talking about at the end of Codecept, you can't open multiple tabs. You can't run more than one browser at the same time. It's running in the browser, so it kind of has those limitations. And again, it's always going to be in JavaScript because it has to run in the browser. So there are some trade-offs with it, but for me and for the projects that I work on, they're totally worth it because they're not use cases I need to worry about. And I get all of the benefits of the timeline recording. So that's Cypress in a nutshell. Anyone got questions?
I think there's some in the chat, Owen.
Thanks. So one was, what does Cypress do that Jest? Oh, I'm gone. Let me just scroll up something. Yeah, one was, what does Cypress do that Jest doesn't? So Jest is kind of targeted on unit testing. So yeah, if you go onto Jest's documentation, that's around writing JavaScript tests on code logic, as it were. The simplest example being that cliche add function where you get the sum of two numbers. You know, that's the kind of stuff that testing does. Now, Cypress claim to be able to support that as well, but they predominantly focus on end-to-end and scenario-based tests on your application. So that's being able to click through a journey, much like what you've seen, some of those samples, hopefully they weren't too laggy. That's being able to select elements, type into them, proceed, and again, extend that even further with screenshots of those journeys as well, or also being able to navigate through them and see what it's like in the browser in kind of a recorded test. Jest doesn't really do that. I know they have things like snapshots, but again, that's taking a JSON representation of components and things like that. It's not quite the same. What do you mean by that, Maz? Would we then be able to use unit tests in conjunction with Cypress? Do you mean, would you be able to write unit tests in Cypress? I'm guessing so I'm going to fly with it. It's a good question. A question I don't really have the answer to, if I'm being completely honest. Like, I can probably get it over to you, but I've never written unit tests in Cypress. That's not what I've done. We have unit tests in Jest because that's what we've used for a number of years. And we have end-to-end tests in Cypress because that's the newer kid on the block. We haven't really explored merging those and just doing everything in Cypress. But something I would say as well, actually, we probably would do that actually. So I'm not going to say what I was going to say. So yeah, but we always run them at separate times. If what I was going to say, like, we run unit tests on pre-merging. We may not do that with end-to-end tests. So. Another question is, does Cypress work with third-party apps like Browser Stack? If not, any recommendations? It's a good question. The basic answer is no. I mean, I think it may be possible to actually, no, the answer is definitely no, because of the way, so you can't run it via Browser Stack to start supporting more browsers. You're always going to be confined to what Cypress supports. And for that reason, there's little value in going to something like Browser Stack. You're just better off sticking with Cypress. So yeah, that's probably one of the downsides, I guess. I think, is there any more questions? I think that was it. Someone shout up if is there a way to run